Hi, I'm Mike Glenn. I am the president of the Engaged Church Network, and we're glad that you have joined us for today's podcast. Our guest today is Mayor Ken Moore, who has been the mayor of Franklin since 2011, when everybody else stepped back and left you standing forward there, huh? When Mayor Schroeder at the time left to take a position with the state at TDOT, and you were vice mayor. That was fall of 2011, and then you were elected.
Then I was elected that fall, actually, and so I've had 4 elections since. So I'm now in the first year of my 4th term as mayor.
So now it's your fault. You know better, and you're still here, so nobody to blame but you.
Well, my wife encouraged me.
Oh, well, that's because you retired and you need to have somewhere to go. So we all know how that goes when you get retired, and your wife says, "Don't you have somewhere to go?" kind of thing. Let's talk first. We're in an election season, and I don't want to talk about that. Here's what I do want to ask. All of us have friends who are concerned about the country, the city, the county. They're good people, would do a good job, but for whatever reason, do not think that their faith would be well served or that Christians need to be involved in that. You have been involved, obviously. Well, you were an alderman before you were mayor.
Correct.
And so you've been involved 13, 14 years now, leading Franklin, doing very well. What would you say to those brothers and sisters who are committed Christians about the need for good people in the political process at every level?
Well, let me start out by saying I am a Christian.
Yeah.
And I would follow that by I never desired to be in politics.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of those things that God put it in my way.
Mm.
It started when I was president of the Tennessee Orthopedic Society, and I was asked by the lobbyists for the State Medical Society to come help on 3 bills that affected orthopedic surgeons. And so I got my feet wet on that, doing policy. And then a friend of my wife's family, Lamar Alexander, decided he was going to run for president. And he called me and he said, "Ken, help me raise some money from doctors. And your audience may not know, but most doctors are very tight with their wallet."
Right.
But I was wildly successful raising a lot of money for a great candidate for president, and that kind of put me in the political sphere.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I didn't have the desire to run for office. It really just kind of was a fluke that I ran for office.
Mm-hmm.
I had a friend that we'd worked on a lot of campaigns together, and he said, "They're having an alderman race in Franklin." And as brilliant as I was, I said, "What's an alderman?" And pretty quickly he explained that, and then he looked at me in the eye and he says, "You ought to run." Well, it's one of those moments that, you didn't think about it.
Right.
You just said yes.
Yeah.
And so I found myself in a race against 13 other people for 4 positions, and the rest is history. I won that one, and then, of course, I've been, had the honor to be elected 4 more times since that time. Mm-hmm. But I would encourage people to consider running for office. Everybody has an opinion.
Right.
And hopefully people would look at it that they think that they can learn and inform and help other people work through the process of making our communities better if they're running for local office or state or even federal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of my passions is to get good people, believers, involved in the political process and running for office and serving at every level. And I think we make a mistake when we withdraw from the political conversations.
Well, I would totally agree with you on that.
Yeah.
I think politics has a bad name, that it's a dirty business, and certainly we've had some bad actors, but it's a profession that requires you to have a lot of integrity, and also you bear a lot of trust from the people that you're serving. And what greater an honor could you have but to serve the people where you live?
Right.
and try to make a community better.
Yeah, quite literally serve and help your neighbors in very real ways.
It's an extension of helping people.
Right.
It's not done under the auspices of the church necessarily, but the things that we're able to do. I mean, you think about picking up garbage and fixing potholes and collecting your utility bill and things like that. All that's important, but there's a lot of other things as far as, for example, our solid waste workers. They have a lot of homes that they serve that the people can't get out and pull their garbage can to the street. So they're going in and getting the can and taking care of them. There are instances where people need just a little help. And fortunately, we have a great team at the City of Franklin that's willing to go the extra mile to help people.
Now, you've been mayor since 2011. Franklin, when I moved here in 2001, was a long way from Nashville. And you probably remember, as I do, that people would talk about having to drive all the way into Nashville for whatever, to shop or to eat or whatever. That's not the way it is now. Franklin is now right up against Nashville in a lot of ways. So talk to me about some of the changes that you've seen.
Well, first of all, we have a great relationship with our large suburb to the north. There's a lot of great people up there. But you're exactly right. There's been a lot of change in Franklin, and I hear a lot of contrast because my wife grew up in Franklin. But she says, I wouldn't move back to Franklin if it was like it was when I grew up.
Right, yeah.
So we've been growing at a pace of about 2,000 people a year now for about 30 years. And so our challenge has been, how do we manage that growth and continue to have that special feel as a community that Franklin has? Some of it is geography and the fact that our historic core is separated from the economic generator of Cool Springs Mall and all the businesses we have. But it's also just got something special that people buy into being part of the city and continuing to want it to continue to have that flavor. People move from California, they move from Chicago, they move from New York, and all of a sudden they're trying to act like they were from Franklin originally. And they're also quick to say after a year, we don't want anybody else to move here.
Yes, right, yeah. We want to be the last person to move in and that kind of stuff. How has one of the things that we're dealing with in local churches is people are moving in from Chicago, California, and other places, and they are not. They come from a different culture, different background, and therefore would have a different expectation and need of church. Have you found dealing with folks who are coming from these other places to want or need different things from the city?
Well, I find that people that are moving here are seeking something.
Right.
And I think they see that Franklin and the entire Middle Tennessee area has what they're seeking. And I think they're seeking a way of life. I think they're seeking certain values. We're a very Christian community. In fact, at one time, I think we had 250 churches we counted in Williamson County.
Yeah.
And so we are the buckle of the Bible Belt for sure. Yeah. They do bring different faith practices here, and some of them are not Christian. Some of them are faiths that we're not familiar with. But we try to embrace everyone. And one of the things that we've done is Unite Williamson in the past, where we encourage people to understand and know who these people are of other faiths, to know their neighbor.
Right,
and I think that's part of the charge that we have is understanding who our neighbor is.
Now, let's talk about an issue I know is important to you. Several weeks ago, you and I had a conversation, maybe longer than that, and the burden of your heart of that conversation was suicides in Williamson County. So walk me through, one, how that came to your attention, and then how you have led the city and other entities to respond.
Well, a number of years ago when Governor Haslam was governor, he picked 9 cities in the state of Tennessee as pilot communities for healthier communities.
Mm-hmm.
And we were successful in fulfilling all the criteria and were designated as a healthier community. And we focused on 4 different areas in that process: obesity, tobacco cessation, activity, and mental health. Everybody wanted to talk about all the things
Right.
except mental health. And so when we noticed that, I said, well, let's get a group of people together and talk about mental health and try to raise awareness.
Mm-hmm.
I call it a blue ribbon panel. And from that blue ribbon panel came Find Hope Franklin.
Mm-hmm.
And we focused on 4 different things. First, number one, it's okay to talk about mental health. You talk about being a diabetic or having
Right.
heart disease. Mental health is a health issue or a disease just like any other
Mm-hmm.
disease that we talk about. Secondly, as you mentioned, we have a high suicide rate among 40, 50-year-old men.
Mm-hmm.
Also, we have a high suicide attempt rate among our youth, which is just crushing. So we identified that issue and started working to train people on suicide prevention. Suicide prevention, there's a course called QPR, Question, Persuade, Refer.
Mm-hmm.
And so just like CPR, people knowing what to do in
Right.
that case, they should be able to understand and hear some of those comments that make you think, hey, I need to ask a few questions here.
Right.
And then what do you do after you've asked the question and you're concerned really about a person? How do you get them to somebody with help?
Mm-hmm.
So we've trained probably 500 people up to this point in this particular technique, and it's like an hour-long course, and it's available to church groups, Sunday school classes, usually limited to about 25 people.
Mm-hmm.
Then we created a website on Find Hope Franklin that lists some of the best resources for people.
Available. Mm-hmm.
And one of the best resources that's happened since this started is 988. It is a crisis line.
Right.
And they're able to help. Call that number. They're able to help you walk through maybe some things or get you to somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And lastly, people that are having a mental health crisis end up in 2 places. They end up in jail or they end up in the emergency room. If they've committed a crime, they're in jail.
Right.
If they haven't, they're taken to the emergency room. And this is a huge burden on an emergency room who's already tending to a lot of sick folks and
Right.
trauma, and quite frankly, aren't really prepared to handle some of the mental health crisis. So we've advocated for establishment of a crisis stabilization unit in our community where people can immediately get into a continuum of care.
Right. Now, this is obviously a place where local churches can partner. So what if I'm a pastor and I'm listening to you right now, what would be my next step?
I think the next step is to understand where they would want to be in the process. If they want to be part of Find Hope Franklin, I do have a couple of pastors on
Right.
Find Hope Franklin and would love to welcome them. If they have people that would like to be trained in Question, Persuade, Refer, or even learn to become a trainer, we can make that available, and they would just need to contact me at ken.moore@franklintn.gov.
And of course, this is on the website.
Yes.
All on the website.
Find Hope Franklin
Find Hope,
website,
yeah.
yes.
Be a good place to do that. On any given Sunday, and I tell the pastors that I work with, on a given Sunday, you have a significant number of people who have thought like this during the past week, and are maybe even thinking about it now, sitting in your congregation.
Yes.
And we need to be aware of that.
It's a problem that we need to elevate the discussion about and awareness about, and also how to handle those situations, just as I was speaking.
Yeah. Now, most of the time when you get on YouTube and you see pastors and city councils or pastors and mayors, they're arguing and yelling about books in a library or this or that kind of stuff. My father was a politician in Huntsville was on the city council and all that. I learned a lot of leadership working with people from my dad. I've always encouraged pastors to know the mayor, to introduce themselves to the mayor, because sooner or later you're going to have to deal with the mayor, and you don't want your first conversation to be adversarial, whether it's the parking lot easement or something like that. You want to have some kind of relationship. What would you want the churches in Middle Tennessee, in Franklin, to know about the needs of the city and how these churches can engage to make a difference?
Well, there's lots of reasons that churches may want to engage in the city, and probably the most common is that they're expanding their footprint on their property, or they're changing something about the property, and I'm always glad to meet with them, but I encourage them quickly to get involved with my staff.
Right.
Because one of the worst mistakes I see is that people will start doing a lot of planning, and then all of a sudden they say, well, I think we'll go to the city and ask them. Well, they spent a lot of money, maybe had a lot of things that they've done, and staff would say, no, that doesn't work here. Yeah. The zoning isn't right.
The zoning, the sewer lines on the other side.
Yeah, exactly, those type things. And other issues that churches may have, I'd love to meet with pastors. I've met with you a number of times, and it's always refreshing. And I've also embraced people that want to come by or grab me on the street and tell me that they're praying for me, and I'm always glad to accept prayers. And so I've had quite a few people, pastors, individuals, come to my office and actually pray for me. And it is a heavy job whenever you're responsible for 90,000 people and their welfare.
And everybody's dreams and everybody's hopes and dreams for their children and the school systems and all that. And
so there's a lot of pressure out there.
A lot of that. Well, I'm glad you are doing it. Now, I want to stop just a minute and say one more time. Find Hope Franklin.
Yes,
is the website about the
FindHopeFranklin.com.
So if you are pastoring a local church, this is a serious issue in Middle Tennessee, and just by the numbers, if you just do the research, somebody in your church is thinking along these lines. So you need to educate yourself and prepare your church as best you can and how to respond in a life-affirming and hope-giving way. And I appreciate the mayor's leadership in this area. This is Ken Moore. He has been our guest. He is the mayor of Franklin and an overall good dude, and I'm glad he's my friend. So thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.